Tressa Yonekawa, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Kyle, I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you for having me.
I am excited to have you on the show, hear your story, and talk about communication. Obviously, that's something near and dear to me and many of the listeners on this show. But before we dive into that, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today?
I fix relationships. And so the way that I'm showing up in the world today is that I am full of exuberance and enthusiasm, I guess, for just helping people understand how to communicate better, how to use the tools of communication to connect better with themselves and each other. And it's my only focus right now.
Amazing. And so relationships is a really broad term, and I'm curious where this is applied. Is this in personal romantic relationships? Is this in business relationships relating to your team, your clients? Tell me where is your most favorite place to play
That's
in
a
this
great
world?
question. Yeah, I love that question. I've spent almost 30 years now in corporate culture. So that was where relationships started for me. When I started understanding and seeing over a couple of decades that the skills of great leaders are also the skills of great lovers, I got really interested in how to work with couples, high profile couples. And so that's mainly my clientele right now, just helping people understand how to have great relationships so that nobody knows that they have any problems in their relationship.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that this is something that it's hard to tell maybe on the surface for high performing leaders. I have seen and worked with many of them in the space, and until something really goes wrong, it's hard to tell that there's things going wrong at all a lot of the times. When it comes to being a high profile leader, what are some of the differences, or what's the uniqueness of their situation when it comes to their relationships, maybe with themselves, with their team, with their partners, and how what are some of the problems that emerge at this level? Because I know there's lots of demands, and most of the stories on this podcast are stories that come from when we take things a little bit too far in that area.
Absolutely. And, when we're talking about high performers across any industry, anywhere in the world, we're talking about people who put a lot of requirements on ourselves. We, as high performers, we want to be the best, do the best, and have the most. And so when it comes to our relationships, we tend to treat our relationships like a business, like a corporate holding. It can start out very romantic and playful when we put our time there, and then things get more functional. And what I've seen over and over for now 30 years is that when we, as high profile people, do not put time into our relationship like everybody needs to, we start to unravel. And yet there is a higher expectation for high performers to get it right. And so I've had so many clients say, our pictures look really good, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Dot, dot, dot.
So one of the things you said is that there's a lot of expectations. And in my experience and what I've seen, these expectations start with ourselves. In order to be the high achievers that we are on this show, that are the guests, that are the listeners on this show, a lot of times we have to get some wires crossed, usually from a very young age, that inspires this kind of behavior. We have to try hard to prove ourselves by what we are doing rather than allowing who we are being. And I'm curious if you've seen this same pattern, and can you describe some of the roots of these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the pattern and lived the pattern. And the roots of the challenges, I would say across 100% of the time, come from early expectations of being good, doing the right thing, filling expectations of other people, really not checking in with ourselves, not being taught or shown by example how to check in with ourselves and what's going on for us. We tend to be people pleasing. And if not people pleasing, then we tend to be win at all costs. So there's a lot of the competition, if we were in sports and those kinds of things, that there's the winner and then there's everybody else. And I think all of those things come into play with doing the right thing versus being the right thing, doing good versus being good, and filling expectations that if they are not now external, we very much internalize them and then we see them externally. So leaders and high profile people, not the same thing, but leaders and high profile people have expectations of self that we want reflected back to us a lot of the times. And so in order to do that, it becomes performative.
And tell me a little bit about how this might show up in the workplace, even though maybe the root of the problem is internal and maybe the bigger problem is in our private relationships. I'm certain that this misalignment manifests in a lot of ways in how we relate to and lead our teams and maybe even communicate with our clients.
Absolutely. And there are so many ways, from not seeing people as equal or able, having to label people in order to think that we understand them, having our own reactivity. So when we've had like the bad boss, that's probably the lowest energetic example of that in a workplace. That somebody who is an egoic leader and needs to be right and can't really hear anything else, and things better be done the way they say that they need to be done, but then it's still not good enough. That kind of boss would be one example of where this gets spun. An example in personal lives would be that we just don't feel like we connect. We don't hear each other. We're having the same fight on repeat. That's a really important one, that comes up a lot, that we don't know how to get out of the spin of arguing or being mad about, being frustrated with, or agitated by the same things over and over again.
Yeah, I've explored this in many ways in myself and with the people I've worked with, and I've seen being that egoic leader and having this perfectionist mindset makes it difficult for your team to really step into the roles that they're meant to be. And if they're not a people pleasing, then a lot of the times, and it's what we've been trained ourselves to do, we are problem solvers. And so team will come to us with questions and problems, and we will solve the problems and we'll solve them quicker and quote unquote better than anyone else can. But a lot of times this trains our team members not to think on their own, but to seek permission, which creates this spiral where I think a lot of the people that you're talking about are frustrated with their team and wish their team would take more ownership. But because of this pattern, we're always stepping on their toes and preventing them from having the autonomy and the ownership that we're really hoping for.
And that, when we see that, and we see it too often, we see it too often today. What have you found helps that?
Hmm. Well, some of the things is understanding what your highest value role is. And one of the things I see is this is a symptom of sticking with the things that you are good at, which are very high value, but really lower value than the best things you could be doing. But because you are uncertain and because you are uncomfortable being in that highest value, highest leverage role, there's a certain safety in sticking with the things that you know, which are the things that you've really built a team around you to do and to help with. But you are constantly trying to grip control there because that's what you understand. And I believe that visionaries and leaders and high performers, that are the people we're talking about here, are best when they are moving into the uncertainty. They are leading others with their vision and showing the way rather than trying to do all of the little pieces that make up the day to day business.
Yeah, I love that. That's very pragmatic and solves for a lot. And another part that I've found that works when I've been working with leaders and teams is that when we get to the place of self worth and we can solve for that, that opens up a lot of space to allow and even require people to thrive and be creative. And until we get to that opening, that deepest level of ability, which I think is a very agile need, it makes everything move faster when we don't have to first suffer through or make other people suffer through our issues that came from way back when, that manifest in ways like you're talking about, that we sometimes don't even recognize, or often don't even recognize, because it's so like it's just this low level pattern that we've been living for so long, and we will try to recreate the chaos that we have not addressed until we figure out what's happening. When we can see it, we can't unsee it. And
Mm.
that tends to help make a lot of change at the highest level, at any level of leadership and relationship.
Can you tell me? So I'm sure that there are many people out there talking about these things, and there's probably some things that you really stand behind and some things that you find to be unique or different or contrary about your way of doing things. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, what do you believe that's different, or what really goes against the grain with your personal philosophy or process when you're working with people on this level?
Well, I think what goes against the grain is that I don't believe we have to have a process. I think that once we have a clear understanding, which can happen very quickly, a lot of times in the first hour, when we have an understanding that we're all here at the table for change, that what's happening isn't working, and that we're ready to do something about it, then there doesn't have to be a process. We don't have to go back and talk about everything that's happened. We can just look at the core reasons, the core happenings, understand the reason for it, and then very quickly figure out what we want to do instead. So we look at the pattern, we look at why the pattern hasn't been healthy or helpful, and then we decide what pattern we want to put in its place. And it's just boom, it happens very fast. And one of the things that happens is that people want a process. A lot of people don't trust something that happens very quickly and changes how they live, how they behave, how other people relate to them very rapidly. So the people that I work with, I think, are high performers for a reason. They're ready for the change. They want the change. They know they want it. They just don't know how to do it. But once they get it, they've got it.
Can you give us a story or an example of what this looks like in the real world? And I understand it might not be, or you may not need to disclose like specific names or companies or anything, but show us what this looks like in practice.
Okay, well, I'll talk about a couple that I recently had that graduated from therapy, with me, graduated from related with me. I'm not a therapist, but what happened, and I think very rapidly, was that male and female couple, she had a lot of control stuff happening, a lot of anxiety around not having control. Once she realized that how she was treating her family was impacted by that feeling of a lack of safety, not just needing control, but a feeling of a lack of safety in her body and her life. Once she could see that and could see how she was treating her children and her spouse, and that it was mean and harmful to her, she could then not unsee it, and then could ask, what do I do? And that all happened, of course, in the first few minutes of working together. And so now what do I do? The process of changing the pattern that has been with you for your whole life happened over the course of the next few months. But it doesn't have to be talking about it for 10 years. Although talk therapy is amazing, you can make these changes very quickly. And I think when couples come together, there's so many over 30 years, so many people who have understood themselves and each other better, people who were at the end of their relationships who thought that they were coming to me for a more elegant exit or for mediation for an exit or a divorce. And what ended up happening was they began to understand all the patterns that had gotten in the way and could see each other again and could see hope for the future. And the word that I hear the most from people within the first hour is hope. And so when people come to me, they have gotten to the place where they are out of hope, but they don't necessarily want a divorce. They
Hmm.
don't want to have to divide finances or time with children or households or things like that. So they're looking for another option. And I think this is it. I think this is, and it's so simple.
Is there a time in your life where you were experiencing this lack of safety and the impact that it was having in perhaps a time of both seeing this impact in your professional and personal world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had it when I was very young in my household. I had a mom who was very solid and had a very professional career, worked at Stanford and all of these things. And I had a dad who was very chaotic and addicted. And so there was never stability. And so coming from that environment and trying to understand everything without the guidance of ever talking about what was happening. And then going to college and getting degrees in the neuroscience of cognition for communication. Like I've always been seeking a way to understand how communication can work because I didn't have role models of it when I was younger, but I've always known that we can do it better. So I've had a lifetime of seeking communication and relationship skills. How can we do this in a way that impacts culture, impacts how we look at people with different colors of skin from different cultures, all of those things. And how can we do this better within ourselves was ultimately what what the big wisdom was. How do we communicate here first so that we can bring something better into the spaces between us?
So, can you give me an example of a specific moment in time, maybe when you saw this parallel in your adult life? There was maybe a particular moment of communication, not necessarily what you learned, but where you were in time, in space, and what the experience was.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. The first thing that comes to mind is I was with my first partner, my first kind of grown up relationship, first marriage. And he was 8 years older than me. I was pretty young. We met when I was 16 and he was 22, 23. And the what had happened was we'd been together for 9 years. It wasn't particularly happy, but it was what I understood I was doing at the time. Without knowing these particular skills well, I just took it and took it and took it. And he was emotionally, verbally not kind and abusive, never physically. But he would say things like there would be one of my piece of my hair on the tile floor of the house that I had built, paid to build, and had built. And he would yell at me and say, "You're so stupid. Like, you can't even, like, how can you?" All of those things about nothing, like a piece of hair on the floor. So I had dropped out of school in order to help him become what he wanted to become in the world. And there was a point in time where he said, "You're too stupid to get through graduate school." And that was the point where I lost it. I had no other way of communicating. I screamed at him. And it's a time where, like, I'm not at all, it's embarrassing to think back, even though I was very young, about how I had no other way of communicating other than to just scream at the top of my lungs about how much I hated him. And coming down from that, backing away from that, and looking at him and thinking, I've never felt so much anger in my life. And I've never felt so, like, all of that frustration. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I started doing more studying because I was going to graduate school for
Hold on,
cognition
hold
for
on, hold
communication.
on.
Yeah.
Before we get to the solution,
Yeah.
tell me about the room that you were in that this conversation, quote unquote, conversation, if we can call it that, occurred.
Right. Very dysfunctional conversation. The
Yeah.
room, like the
What did
physical.
the room look like?
Oh, I love that. We were in the hallway of our home. So just a white hallway with, it was like Spanish tiles. So terracotta looking tile on the floor into the kitchen and dining room area. And behind him was the back of the stairs up to the loft. And to my left, just in front of me, about 10 feet, was the front door. And that was my view.
What time of day was this?
It was about, I would say it was like late afternoon.
Great. And then I'd love to hear about a similarly specific moment, but of the exact opposite frequency.
All
A
right.
moment where you were experiencing clarity in a relationship. You saw your own patterns and could finally reach and relate to a partner, and maybe seeing this expressed in your business as well.
I love that. So do you want partner or do you want business?
Let's start with partner, and then let's see about business.
Okay. So partner has been fairly recently, just a couple of years ago, where something happened. I think we were actually in my office and I was sitting on my desk and he was standing across the room and he said something. I don't even know exactly what he said, but it made me feel discounted, like he didn't want to be there. And I said something about, well, then I guess we shouldn't be doing this, or meaning we should exit the relationship. It was pretty new. And he was like, "What? What are you talking about? This is so stupid." And he got angry. And I remember countering with that, but then saying, "Wait a minute, let's use the tools that I teach and that we both know. And let's just take a breath. And what is this about?" And he said, "I think we just had a misunderstanding. So let's take another breath." So we take another breath, and I say, "Yeah," because I want to be here with you. And he said, I want to be here with you. I don't know what just happened. We just had a miscommunication. And I said, okay, it was a miscommunication. And that could have gone really sideways. So let's just take another breath and appreciate that we're using the tools. And we just started laughing about it. Like it was just like, man, that could have gone absolutely to a very bad place very quickly. And we could have said harmful things, but we used the tools, and it was a celebration. It was actually like, whoa, this is cool that we're both in a place of being in a relationship with another person who gets it.
Lovely. Can you tell me, let's see this play out in a business sense too.
Okay. I am a co-founder of a culture first consultancy in Portland, Oregon, and there's a specific time when I exited the partnership because I wasn't in agreement with some things that my business partner was doing. Nothing wrong, just a direction that I didn't want to go. And I called her to say, "Listen, we're breaking up, or I'm breaking up with you. I'm leaving this relationship." She said, "Fine, whatever, go do your thing." And my feelings were hurt, and I was just like, okay, that's it. And we didn't communicate then for a while, a couple of years, actually 4 years. And I'm going to come back to the opposite of that now. When we finally connected again, I had reached out to her. No, she reached out to me actually, and just said, "Hey, just wanted to check in." And we had this conversation about where we were at, how painful it was, and that it was really silly that in the work that we do, the way that we do it, that we didn't have the conversation that we ask all of our clients to have. We didn't have the hard conversation. We just backed out of it because we were busy and tired. And then fast forward to being invited to come back into the partnership with these tools and the joy that it is now to do this work and the joy that it is to have those hard conversations. So when things come up now, one of those things has been that she wanted to go a different way, take a sabbatical, maybe not come back. And the questions that I had and the hurt that I felt about, what do you mean you don't want to do this anymore? What do you mean you don't want to do this with me? Those kinds of things I could ask directly. I could say directly, my feelings are hurt. Like, let me just understand what's coming up for me about abandonment or about whatever it was. And we could solve those very quickly so that it didn't harm our relationship the way that it did the first time.
Amazing. Would you like to hear your story?
Tell me my story. I'm so excited.
You're so stupid. You're never going to make it through graduate school. I'm stopped in my hallway of my home that I built that I built and I paid for and I created. I've been in a partnership for 9 years. And for the last couple of years, we've just been in it because we've been in it. And I wasn't happy. And this moment stopped me in my tracks because the man who I had been helping and supporting, leaving graduate school so that I could help him advance his careers and his goals, is freaking out over things like a piece of hair on the floor, or that he felt maybe uncomfortable or intimidated by what I was doing. And I'm standing there and my jaws dropped that I've given so much to this and gotten so little. I look past him to the door, and it's everything inside of me that I want to just go out and leave and never come back. And I see myself wanting to walk away from things at so many times of grappling with this intensity inside me. It happens in my business partnerships, where when something comes up that's not fully understood and the emotions take over, it seems like all of the intelligence that I have gets taken away and replaced by something entirely that's not me. I think back on myself and my patterns that started from a very young age and realized that this has been something that's been at play my entire life. I had a chaotic father, and a lot of how I learned how to survive and get by in a day-to-day way was just by taking care of him and doing what I could to help him. And I'm seeing that same pattern play out in my personal life, in my relationships, in my work. And I decide that I don't want this to be the path anymore. As I've dedicated myself and my life to psychology, to communications, to understanding, because of these chaos inside of me and around me, I knew I wanted a better way. I wanted a way that I could have an understanding, not just a process, not just another thing to do and another set of instructions, but to be able to see a pattern quickly and to be able to experience change quickly. I didn't want to be sitting in a chair, a therapist chair, talking for 10 years. I wanted a pathway that I could see forward. I wanted to be in control of my relationship with myself and be able to be honest and authentic with my expression. Now, this process would take many, many years. And let me tell you, a lot of costly and painful mistakes. But dozens of little moments like this, personal and professional, equipped me with a different perspective. I can remember years later in a new partnership, a similar event happening. My partner comes into my office and he said something that made me feel discounted. And at first, that same spirit took hold of me. I said, I guess we should not be doing this. Looking towards the door again, ready to walk out. And we both, instead of withdrawing and retreating, take a breath and use the tools that we have worked so hard to develop, that we have become so proud of. And through a couple of breaths and questions and clarity and understanding that what was on the surface of this experience was not at all what the real story was, we ended up laughing. Partnerships in my work life that once were totally misdirected by this became more open, more clear, and more transparent. I was able to work with my business partners, my romantic partners, my team members, my clients in a way that was authentic, that was aligned, and that created results faster than I could have imagined possible. And it's this same process that I've spent so many years studying, experiencing, and practicing that I'm here to teach you about today. And it doesn't have to take years of work. It doesn't have to take processes. It doesn't have to take doing more. Once we can see these patterns, you won't unsee them. And that's what I'm here to show you today.
Hi, all. You're amazing.
Thank you.
What the heck? You are the distiller. You're amazing. That was incredible and accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a cool
Absolutely.
reflection.
Yeah, this is the culmination of my tool set and my practice over many, many years of listening very carefully and finding the thread and the way to help express the deep truths that so many people, because they're so close to their truth, have a hard time sharing. And so, yeah.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, the part about being so close to our truth that we get lost in kind of the details or trying not to overwhelm other people with the truth. The way that you bring that through is a beautifully focused and emotionally connecting way. Like your words are beautiful. And so when you're doing this for people who are on stages or who are speaking or leading, I can see the huge impact, huge effectiveness.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. As somebody who's practiced communication a lot, game recognizes game, and I'm honored to have taken you through this process with us today.
I love it. I love learning. There's always something to learn, I think, especially in communication and relationships. That,
Absolutely.
yeah, I appreciate you so much. And I appreciate being here with you so much.
Thank you, Tressa. Do you have any closing thoughts for us today, and where can we go to learn more about you?
Thank you. Closing thoughts would be, show up for this kind of thing. Show up to have the reflection of you from people who listen, who care, who can offer back. It's not we tend to get into one way, giving everything or trying to help everyone. And when we can have communication like this, Kyle, and when we can have communication like this in the world, where we're all listening, and we're all reflecting, and it's all so clear and beautiful. It's wow. Yeah. And
Wonderful.
the way to find me, I'm at tressayonekawa.com. You can email me at tressa@epicphoto.com. Yeah, life is, you can find me on all the socials under Tressa Yonekawa. Let's connect.
Amazing. Tressa, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine podcast.
Kyle, what a joy. Thank you so much.